This encounter happened back in 2007 when I was 20 years old. I'm a female, and I didn't get my driver's license until January of that year. So now being able to drive myself opened a lot of doors for me. Because of that, I took a lot of solo road trips to my friend's house that was a couple of states over. I remember one time specifically, I was driving alone on an interstate on a random day in July on my way to visit my friend for a long weekend. Her parents were away, and we had the house to ourselves, and were planning on just binging horror movies and eating junk food for 3 days straight. I was driving a beat-up 1999 Honda Civic that I'd bought off my uncle. It wasn't pretty, but it ran. Or at least I thought it did. I was about 4 hours into a 6-hour drive, cutting through a stretch of rural highway that felt like it existed in a vacuum. It was the kind of road where you'd see a farmhouse maybe once every 20 miles, surrounded by endless fields of tall, drying corn and dense patches of woods that looked pitch black even in the daylight. It was around 7 p.m. The sun was starting its descent, casting those long orange shadows across the asphalt. I was blasting a mix CD, singing along, feeling that specific kind of invincibility you only feel when you're 20 and completely alone. Then, the music cut out. Well, the music didn't cut out, the engine did. The car gave a violent lurch, like it had been kicked from behind, and the steering wheel locked up in my hands. I saw smoke, thick, white steam billowing out from under the hood, instantly blinding my view of the road. Panic, sharp and cold, spiked in my chest. I managed to muscle the car over to the shoulder, the gravel crunching loudly beneath my tires as I came to a halt. Silence. That's the first thing I remember about stopping. Once the engine ticked into silence, the quiet of the landscape was heavy. No birds, no other cars, just the hissing of my radiator and the hum of the heat rising off the pavement. I grabbed my phone, a silver Motorola Razr, and flipped it open, searching for service. Of course, I held it up to the window, leaning forward, praying for even a single bar, but nothing appeared. I was in a dead zone. I stepped out of the car. The heat hit me like a physical wall. It was humid, sticky, the air smelling of ozone and burning rubber. I popped the hood, waving away the steam, staring at an engine block I knew absolutely nothing about. My dad, the calm thinker in my life, had tried to teach me the basics, but I hadn't listened. I could hear his voice in my head. Always check your fluids, Luna. The car's old. Treat it with respect. Great, I muttered to myself, wiping sweat from my forehead. Sorry, Dad. I got back in the car and locked the doors. The plan was simple. Wait. Someone had to drive by eventually. This was an interstate after all. But 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky a bruised purple. The cornfields on either side of the road seemed to grow taller, closing in. That's when I saw the truck. It appeared in my rearview mirror as a speck, then grew rapidly into a rusted, dark green Ford F-150. My heart gave a little jump of relief. Finally, I rolled down my window just a crack, ready to wave them down. The truck slowed as it approached. It didn't pull in front of me to offer a jump or look at the engine. Instead, it pulled up directly beside me, facing the wrong way on the shoulder, so the driver's window was aligned with mine. The window rolled down. The man inside was older, maybe mid-40s, with a face that looked like leather left out in the sun too long. He wore a faded baseball cap pulled low, and his eyes were hidden behind mirrored aviator sunglasses, reflecting my own anxious face back at me. He didn't smile. He just chewed on a toothpick, resting a thick, hairy arm on the doorframe. Car trouble? His voice was like gravel. Yeah, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Overheated, I think. My dad is a mechanic, though. He's on his way with a tow truck right now. It was a lie. A stupid, obvious lie. If my dad was on his way, why was I sitting in a dead car in a dead zone? The man didn't respond immediately. He just kept chewing that toothpick, moving it from one side of his mouth to the other. He looked past me, scanning the empty back seat of my car, then looked at the pile of clothes and snacks on the passenger seat. Dad's coming. Huh? He said, a smirk finally touching the corner of his lips. That's good. Bad spot to be stuck, little lady. Not a lot of reception out here. I have full bars, I lied again. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Is that right? He leaned out of his window a bit more. "Well, I know engines. Why don't I take a look? Might just be a hose. Get you on your way. Before it gets dark. You don't want to be out here when it gets dark." There was something about the way he said dark. It wasn't a warning about safety. It sounded like a promise. "No, thank you," I said firmly. "I'm fine waiting." "Suit yourself." He rolled up his window without another word. The truck rumbled, the gears grinding as he shifted. He pulled away, driving slowly down the shoulder before merging back onto the highway and disappearing around a bend in the road. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The relief was instant, but it was followed by a crushing sense of isolation. I was alone again. I checked my phone. Still no service. 30 minutes passed. The sun was almost gone now. The world was turning gray and black. I turned on the car's battery just to check the time on the dash. 8:15 p.m. I needed to conserve the battery, so I turned it off again. Then, I heard a sound. It was faint at first, the crunch of gravel, not the rhythmic sound of tires on the highway, but the slow, deliberate crunch of something heavy moving on the shoulder. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. I looked out the front windshield. Nothing. I turned my head to the left, looking out the driver's side window into the median grass. Nothing. Then I turned to the right. My blood ran cold. About 50 yards away, emerging from the tall cornfield that lined the passenger side of the road, was a figure. It was a man. He wasn't walking on the road. He was walking through the ditch, wading through the knee-high grass, heading straight for my car. As he got closer, stepping out of the shadows of the corn stalks, the fading light caught the logo on his hat. It was the same faded baseball cap. It was the driver of the green truck. He hadn't left. He had driven around the bend, parked his truck out of sight, and walked all the way back through the fields so I wouldn't hear his vehicle approach. He wasn't carrying a toolbox. He wasn't carrying a gas can. In his right hand, hanging loosely by his side, he was holding a tire iron. And he wasn't looking at the car engine. He was looking directly at me. And this time, he wasn't wearing the sunglasses. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and fixed on my face with a look of predatory excitement. I scrambled to check the door locks, my fingers fumbling. Click. Click. They were locked. But a Honda Civic window is just glass. It's thin. And he was big. He reached the passenger side window. He didn't knock. He didn't ask if I changed my mind. He just leaned down, pressing his face against the glass, creating a fog with his breath, and tapped the metal tire iron against the window pane. "Open the door. Luna," he whispered. I froze. I hadn't told him my name. My brain short-circuited. It's hard to explain the specific type of paralysis that takes over when a stranger in the middle of nowhere says your name. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Open the door. Luna." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized two things in rapid succession. First, the passenger seat was piled with my laundry and snacks. But sitting right on top, facing the window, was my college lanyard with my plastic ID card. He must have read it when he pulled up the first time. He hadn't been looking at the engine or the back seat. He had been reading my ID, memorizing my face, and planning this exact moment. Second, I realized the tire iron was rising. He didn't swing it with rage. He swung it with a calm, practiced efficiency. Crack. The sound was deafening in the silent car. The passenger window didn't shatter inward like in the movies. It turned into a white, spider-webbed sheet of safety glass, holding together but compromising instantly. I screamed a raw, guttural sound that scratched my throat. "Come on now," he muttered, his voice muffled by the glass. He raised the iron again. I threw my body across the center console, scrambling into the driver's seat, jamming the key into the ignition. I turned it, praying to whatever God was listening. The engine wheezed, choked, and died. A hole punched through the glass this time. His hand, thick and covered in grease, reached through the jagged opening, fumbling for the lock. I didn't think. I just reacted. I slammed my hand onto the horn and held it there. The sound was piercing, a continuous, blaring wail that tore through the night. It was my only weapon. I saw him flinch. He hated the noise. It disrupted the intimacy of the violence he was planning. He retracted his hand, looking over his shoulder at the empty highway. "Shut that up," he yelled, his calm facade breaking for a split second. He struck the window again, harder, sending granules of glass spraying onto my passenger seat. I didn't let go of the horn. I pressed harder, closing my eyes, screaming along with it. Then, light. Through my closed eyelids, I sensed a shift in the brightness. I opened my eyes and looked into the rearview mirror. Twin beams of light were cresting the hill behind us, sweeping over the asphalt. A semi-truck. The man saw it too. He looked at the approaching lights, then back at me. For a second, I thought he was going to try and drag me out right there in front of the witness. His eyes were pure, dilated malice. He pointed the tire iron at me, a silent gesture that said, "This isn't over." Then, he moved. He didn't run to his truck. He didn't run down the road. He stepped backward, slipping effortlessly into the tall corn stalks. 1 second he was there, illuminated by the red glow of my taillights, and the next, the corn swallowed him whole. The semi-truck roared past, the draft shaking my small car. I frantically flashed my high beams, letting go of the horn to wave my hands. The truck's brake lights flared red. He had seen me. Or maybe he had seen the guy. The truck pulled over about 100 yards up the road. I watched as the driver, a burly man in a plaid shirt, hopped out with a massive flashlight. I didn't unlock my doors until he was right at my window, and even then, I made him show me his face. He was an older guy, worried and confused. "Miss, you all right? I saw someone. Looked like they were running into the field," he said, sweeping his flashlight beam over the swaying corn. I unlocked the door and practically fell out onto the pavement, shaking so hard my knees gave out. He had a tire iron. I choked out. He tried to get in. The trucker, whose name I later learned was Heavyset Dave, didn't hesitate. He ushered me into the cab of his truck, locked the doors, and called 911. We sat there, high up above the road, watching the cornfield. Every time the wind blew and the stalks rustled, I flinched, expecting the man in the green hat to burst out. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They found my car with the smashed window. They found the footprints in the ditch. And they found something else. When the officer came over to the truck cab to take my statement, he looked pale. "Luna," he asked, "how long were you waiting there before the man came back?" "Maybe 40 minutes, I said. "Why?" "We tracked his footprints back through the field," the officer said, pointing his penlight toward the dense crops. He didn't walk all the way back to where he parked his truck immediately. There's a spot, about 10 feet into the corn, directly parallel to your car. The grass is matted down flat. I felt the blood drain from my face. "He was sitting there," the officer continued. "We found cigarette butts, fresh ones. He parked his truck, walked back through the field, and sat there watching you for at least 20 minutes before he came out to the road. He was waiting for it to get darker. They never found the man. His truck had no plates, according to the description I gave, or at least none that I noticed. He was just a ghost who drifted off the highway, saw a vulnerable girl, and decided to play with his food. I got my license that year, but I lost my freedom. I sold that Honda Civic 2 weeks later. I couldn't stand to look at the passenger seat where the glass had fallen. To this day, I don't drive on interstates at night, and if I ever have to drive past a cornfield, I keep my eyes strictly on the road. Because the scariest part wasn't the tire iron or the smashed glass. It was the realization that while I was sitting there, bored and annoyed, checking my phone, he was 10 feet away, hidden in the stalks, smoking a cigarette and choosing the perfect moment to say my name. This happened about 5 years ago. I'm a guy, 26 at the time, and I was working the graveyard shift at a budget motel off a busy exit in Nevada. I won't say the specific brand, but think cheap neon lights and stains on the carpet that you don't want to investigate. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to scary stories. I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in demons. I believe in crazy people and drug addicts, because working the night shift, I saw plenty of both. Usually my nights were boring. I'd sit behind the bulletproof glass, which tells you everything you need to know about the neighborhood, watch Netflix on my laptop, and occasionally buzz someone in who lost their keycard. It was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. The lobby was empty. The parking lot was mostly quiet, just the distant hum of the highway and the flickering buzz of the vacancy sign outside. My coworker, a jittery guy named Mike, who was definitely the overreactor type, had called out sick, so I was running the desk alone. I was in the middle of an episode of The Office when the front automatic door slid open. A man walked in. He didn't look like our usual clientele. Usually, we got truckers, weary families trying to save a buck, or locals looking for a place to crash. This guy was dressed in a pristine gray suit, not a wrinkle on it. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with slicked back black hair and a briefcase in his hand. He looked like he was heading to a Wall Street meeting, not checking into a dive motel at 2:30 in the morning. He walked up to the glass partition. The smell of expensive cologne wafted through the pass-through slot, overpowering the smell of stale coffee in the lobby. "Checking in," he said. His voice was incredibly smooth, monotone, and devoid of any inflection. "Sure," I said, pausing my show. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." "I need a room. Ground floor. End of the hall. Far from the exit." It was a weirdly specific request. Usually, people want to be near the exit or near the ice machine. "I can check availability," I said, typing into the system. "I have room 108. It's at the end of the east wing, but it faces the dumpster area, so the view isn't great." "That is perfect," he said. He slid a credit card and a driver's license through the slot. The name on the license was John Smith. I almost laughed. It was obviously fake, or just the most generic coincidence in history. But the photo matched, and the credit card ran through, approved. I wasn't paid enough to be a detective. "All right, Mr. Smith, you're in 108. Here's your key." He took the key card with 2 fingers, not making contact with my hand. "Thank you. I am expecting a visitor later. A woman. If she comes, send her directly to my room. Do not announce her. We have a policy that guests need to show ID at the desk," I recited automatically. He looked up. His eyes were a pale, watery blue, and for a second, I felt like he was looking through me, not at me. "She is my wife. She has a key. Just do not interfere." He slid a $100 bill through the slot. "Now, I know what you're thinking. I should have said no. I should have called the cops, but I was broke, tired, and this guy was intense." I took the bill. "All right." I didn't see anything. He nodded once, turned, and walked down the hall toward the east wing. I pocketed the money and went back to my show. But I couldn't focus. A weird feeling settled in my stomach. Not fear, exactly, but unease. My intuition, usually dormant, was poking me in the ribs. About an hour passed. 3:30 a.m. The phone on the desk rang. It was room 108. "Front desk," I answered. "The television," the man's voice said. "It is too loud." Sir? You're the only one in that wing right now. The rooms next to you are empty." "No," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Not the room next to me. The room inside the wall." The scratching. "Make it stop." My grip tightened on the phone. "Sir, there's no room inside the wall. It might be rats. I can move you to another room." "No," he snapped. "She is coming. I must be here." He hung up. Okay, now I was officially creeped out. The guy was clearly having some kind of mental episode. I debated calling the non-emergency line, just to have a cop swing by. But I didn't want to explain the $100 bribe. I pulled up the security camera feed on my monitor. I switched to the camera for the east hallway. I won, 1 for the 4. Room 108 was at the very end of a long beige corridor. The door was closed. Nothing seemed amiss. I watched it for a few minutes, waiting for something. Then, the door to 108 opened. The man in the suit stepped out. He wasn't carrying his briefcase. He was in his shirt sleeves now, his suit jacket gone. He stood in the middle of the hallway, perfectly still, facing the security camera. He stared directly into the lens. I froze. There was no way he could know I was watching him right then. The camera was a tiny black dome on the ceiling. He slowly raised his hand and pointed a finger down the hallway, back toward the lobby, toward me. Then, he smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was wide, stretched, and wrong. He turned and walked back into his room, closing the door gently. I was reaching for the phone to call the police, bride be damned, when the automatic doors to the lobby slid open again. A woman walked in. She was soaking wet, shivering, wearing a torn sundress that was covered in mud. She was barefoot. She looked like she had just crawled out of a swamp. She stumbled toward the glass, her eyes wide with terror. "Please," she whispered, her voice rasping. "He's here." "I know he's here." I stood up, knocking my chair over. "Who?" "The man in the suit," she sobbed, looking over her shoulder at the dark parking lot. "He took me from the gas station. He said he was going to verify my soul." My blood ran cold. "Room 108, I whispered, before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped to mine. "He's in 108? "Yes," I said. "I'm calling the police right now. Stay here. I'm locking the lobby." "No," she screamed. "If you call them, he'll know. He has a scanner. He hears everything." She looked toward the hallway, the East Wing hallway. "I have to kill him," she said. And then I saw it. In her right hand, hidden behind the folds of her dress, she was holding a jagged, broken neck of a glass bottle. Before I could hit the button to lock the door to the hallway, she sprinted. She didn't run out the exit. She ran toward the rooms. Toward room 108. "Wait," I shouted, fumbling for the master key to chase her. I ran out from behind the desk and sprinted down the hallway after her. I turned the corner just in time to see her reach the end of the hall. The door to room 108 was already open. The man in the suit was standing in the doorway, waiting for her. He wasn't scared. He had his arms spread wide, like he was welcoming a lover. "Darling," he boomed, his voice echoing in the narrow hall. "You're late." She didn't stop. She launched herself at him, the broken bottle raised high. They both tumbled backward into the room, and the door slammed shut with a finality that shook the walls. I skidded to a halt in front of the door, heart pounding out of my chest. I could hear thuds, crashes, and a low, rhythmic chanting coming from inside. I didn't have a weapon. I was just a night auditor, but I couldn't let them kill each other. I swiped my master key. The light turned green. I pushed the door open. The heavy industrial latch clicked, and the door swung inward, revealing the chaos of room 108. I expected screams. I expected blood on the walls. I expected a scene from a slasher movie. Instead, it was silent. The room was in disarray. The bedside lamp was knocked over, casting long, jagged shadows across the carpet. The bed sheets were stripped and tangled in a heap on the floor, but the violence had stopped the moment I swiped my key. The man in the suit, Mr. Smith, was standing in the center of the room. He had the woman in a headlock, his forearm pressed tight against her windpipe. She was clawing at his sleeve, her face turning a mottled purple, her feet kicking feebly at the air. She had dropped the broken bottle. It lay on the carpet, glistening innocuously under the flickering TV light. When I entered, the man didn't panic. He didn't throw her aside. He just turned his head slowly to look at me. His suit was still impeccable, save for a slight wrinkle in the shoulder. His breathing wasn't even elevated. "Close the door," he said. His voice was calm, authoritative, like a manager scolding an employee for interrupting a meeting. My brain was screaming at me to charge him, to tackle him, to do something. I'm a reasonably fit guy, but fear is a heavy blanket. It weighs down your limbs. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, mouth gaping. I called the police. I lied, my voice cracking. "They're 2 minutes away." The man smiled, that same empty, stretched smile. He tightened his grip. The woman's eyes rolled back in her head. "They won't be here in time to save her," he stated matter-of-factly. "And if you step 1 foot closer, I will snap her neck before you can cross the threshold. Do the math." I froze. He was right. He held her life in the crook of his arm, and he looked entirely capable of executing that threat without a second thought. "Let her go," I pleaded, holding my hands up. Just go. Take the back window. I won't stop you." He considered this. He looked at the back window, then at me. He seemed bored. "Fine," he said. He released the woman. She crumpled to the floor like a marionette with cut strings, gasping for air, coughing violently, clutching her throat. The man smoothed his tie. He picked up his briefcase from the desk. He didn't run. He walked toward me. I stepped back into the hallway, terrified he was going to pull a gun or a knife. But he just stopped in the doorway, inches from my face. I could smell the expensive cologne mixed with the metallic tang of fierce sweat. "You have a good night," he said. He turned and walked down the hallway, not toward the back exit, but toward the lobby, toward the front door. I rushed into the room to check on the woman. "Are you okay? Can you breathe?" She looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot and filled with a terror so deep it looked like madness. She grabbed my wrist, her fingernails digging into my skin. "He didn't leave," she wheezed. "He never leaves. He's gone," I promised, pulling out my phone to dial 911 for real this time. I dialed the number and reported the assault. I stayed with her, locking the door and deadbolting it. We waited for 10 minutes. The sirens finally wailed in the distance, getting louder. "See?" I said. "Help is here." The woman shook her head. She pointed a trembling finger at the ceiling corner of the room. "The vent," she whispered. I looked up. The air conditioning vent cover was unscrewed, hanging by a single screw. It was a dark, square hole leading into the crawl space between the floors. "He didn't come in through the door," she said. "He was waiting in the ceiling." A chill went down my spine. When the police arrived, they swept the area. They took the woman to the hospital. They took my statement. I gave them the credit card info, the description, the security footage. The credit card was stolen from a deceased man in Ohio. The name John Smith was obviously fake. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night. The police checked the security footage from the hallway. On the tape, you see the man enter room 108. You see the woman run in later. You see me run in. Then, you see me step back out. You see me talking to someone in the doorway, but you don't see the man leave. The camera clearly shows the hallway for the entire 10 minutes I was inside waiting for the cops. The man in the gray suit never walked out of room 108. He never walked down the hall to the lobby. He never climbed out the back window, which had bars on it, I later realized. I told the police he walked right past me. They thought I was hallucinating from stress. They said he must have slipped out the window, somehow squeezing through the bars. But I know what I saw, and I remember what the woman said. The vent. The crawl space above the motel runs the entire length of the building. It connects every room. I quit the next morning. I didn't even give 2 weeks' notice. I just left my badge on the counter and drove away. Sometimes, when I'm staying in a hotel now, I lie in bed and look up at the air conditioning vent, and I wonder if someone is up there, in the dark, watching me through the slats, waiting for me to fall asleep so they can verify my soul. This encounter happened in 2014. I was 28 years old, living in a suburb of Chicago. I had just bought my first house, a 2-story fixer-upper that was way too big for just me. But the price was a steal because it needed significant renovations. To help pay the mortgage, I decided to rent out the finished basement. It was a self-contained unit. It had its own bathroom, a small kitchenette, and a private entrance around the back of the house. The only connection to my part of the house was a heavy wooden door at the top of the basement stairs, located in my hallway, which I kept locked from my side. I put an ad on Craigslist. I know, strike one, but back then, it was normal. I got a lot of weirdos, but then I met Charles. Charles seemed like the perfect tenant. He was a soft-spoken guy in his late 40s, balding, wearing thick glasses and a sweater vest. He told me he was an actuary, going through a messy divorce and just needed a quiet place to work and sleep. He didn't smoke, didn't have pets, and offered to pay 6 months of rent in cash up front. As a calm thinker type, I did a background check. It came back clean. No criminal record. Credit score was decent. I shook his hand and gave him the keys. For the first 2 months, Charles was a ghost. I rarely saw him. His car, a nondescript beige sedan, would be gone early in the morning and back late at night. Sometimes, I'd hear the faint murmur of his TV through the floorboards, or the sound of water running in the pipes. But otherwise, he was silent. It started with a smell. It was October. I came home from work one day and noticed a faint, chemical odor in the hallway near the basement door. It smelled like bleach mixed with something sweet. like rotting fruit. I figured he was just doing some heavy-duty cleaning. A week later, I woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound. It was coming from beneath my bedroom floor. My bedroom was directly above the main living area of the basement. I lay there in the dark, listening. It sounded like he was moving heavy furniture. I grabbed my phone and texted him. "Hey Charles, everything okay? Little loud down there." The noise stopped instantly. He didn't reply to the text, but the silence returned. I figured he got the message and went back to sleep. The next day, I saw him in the driveway as I was leaving for work. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his skin pale and waxy. "Sorry about the noise last night," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I was rearranging the layout. Can't sleep lately. Insomnia." "It's fine," I said, trying to be a cool landlord. "Just try to keep it down after midnight? The floors are thin." Of course, he smiled. It was a polite smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Won't happen again. Things got weird the following Tuesday. I came home early from work because I had a migraine. My car wasn't in the driveway. I had parked it on the street because the driveway was being resealed. I walked up to the front door and entered quietly, nursing my headache. I walked down the hallway to get some water. As I passed the door to the basement, I froze. The door was open. I always kept it locked from my side. I had the only key to the deadbolt on the main floor side. Charles had a key to the back door, but not this one. The door was ajar, just an inch. A sliver of darkness peered out from the stairwell. I stood there, heart hammering. Had I forgotten to lock it? Maybe. But why was it open? I pushed the door open slowly. The stairs descended into darkness. "Charles?" I called out. No answer. I knew he wasn't home. His car wasn't on the street. I shouldn't have gone down there. Legally, I had to give 24 hours notice to enter, but the open door felt like a security breach. I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs. Nothing happened. The bulb was blown or unscrewed. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight, stepping carefully down the carpeted stairs. The chemical smell was stronger down here. It was overpowering, stinging my nostrils. When I reached the bottom, I swept the light around the kitchenette. It was spotless, obsessive-compulsive, clean. Not a crumb on the counter, no personal photos, no magnets on the fridge. It looked like a showroom. I walked toward the bedroom area. The door was closed. I reached for the knob, but then I stopped. I heard a sound coming from inside the bedroom. It was a low, rhythmic humming, like someone soothing a child. "Charles?" I said, louder this time. The humming stopped. I gripped the doorknob and turned it. It was locked. "Charles, is someone in there?" "I found the upstairs door open," I said, my voice trembling slightly. From behind the door, a voice spoke. It wasn't Charles's voice. It was higher, raspier. "He's not here." I jumped back. "Who are you?" "I'm the guest," the voice giggled. It was a dry, breathless giggle that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Charles said I have to stay in the box until I behave." "The box?" I asked, my stomach turning over. "The box," the voice repeated. "It's dark in here. Can you open the door? I promise I won't bite. Not like last time." Panic flared in my chest. I backed away toward the stairs. "I'm calling the police," I shouted. "No!" The voice shrieked, suddenly turning guttural and angry. The doorknob rattled violently. Clack, 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 clack. Something heavy slammed against the door from the inside. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. I slammed the hallway door shut and fumbled with the deadbolt, locking it. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys. I ran to the kitchen and dialed 911. There's someone in my basement. My tenant locked someone in the bedroom. I grabbed a kitchen knife and stood in the living room, watching the basement door. 5 minutes passed. Then, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window. It was the beige sedan. Charles was home. He got out of the car, carrying 3 large bags of ice and a roll of heavy-duty plastic sheeting. He looked toward the house, and for a second, he looked confused because my car wasn't in the driveway. He thought I was still at work. He walked around the side of the house toward the basement entrance. I was trapped. The police were still minutes away, and Charles was walking into the basement with supplies to dispose of a body. I stood in the kitchen, paralyzed, gripping the handle of the knife so tightly my hand began to cramp. I watched through the window as Charles disappeared around the corner of the house, the heavy bags of ice swinging from his hands. The plastic sheeting was tucked under his arm like a newspaper. My mind was racing. Why ice? Why now? Then, I heard the back door of the basement open. Screech. Thud. The house fell silent for a heartbeat. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't the raspy, giggling voice I had heard earlier. It was a high-pitched, terrified wail coming through the floorboards, muffled but undeniable. "No, no, you promised," the voice shrieked. Then, a loud crash, like a body being thrown against a wall. Then silence. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the hallway door, the heavy wooden door that separated my living space from the basement stairs. I had locked the deadbolt, but the wood was old. I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. They weren't the heavy, dragging footsteps of someone carrying furniture. They were slow, deliberate, and light. He was coming up. He stopped on the landing on the other side of the door. I held my breath. I could picture him standing there in the dark stairwell, staring at the wood grain, his head cocked to the side. "Landlord?" His voice came through the door. It was calm. "The bulb is out down here. Did you come down to change it?" I didn't answer. I stepped back, raising the knife. "I know you're there," Charles said. His tone shifted, losing the polite veneer. It became cold and flat. "I smell your perfume. You were in the hallway. Did you open the door?" "The police are on their way, Charles," I shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but my voice wavered. "Get out of the house." Silence again. Then, the doorknob turned slowly. The lock held. "That's unfortunate," he muttered. Suddenly, the door shuddered violently. He had thrown his shoulder against it. Dust motes danced in the air from the frame. "You shouldn't have gone down there," he said, his voice straining with exertion. "She wasn't ready for visitors. She's sick, very sick." The wood splintered near the strike plate. I scrambled backward into the living room, putting the sofa between me and the hallway. I checked my phone. The 911 operator was still on the line. "They're almost there, ma'am. Stay on the line," she cried. "He's breaking in!" I screamed into the receiver. Charles wasn't stopping. He was a small, middle-aged man, but adrenaline is a powerful thing, and he had a lot to lose. The door frame gave way. The door swung open, hitting the wall with a deafening bang. Charles stood in the doorway. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was still wearing his sweater vest, but his sleeves were rolled up. His hands were red, raw, irritated, like he had been scrubbing them with harsh chemicals. He looked at me, then at the knife in my hand. He adjusted his glasses. "I just wanted a quiet place," he said, shaking his head. "Why couldn't you just take the rent and leave us alone?" He took a step into the hallway. At that exact moment, blue and red lights exploded across the living room walls. The wail of sirens cut through the air, so loud it vibrated in my teeth. Charles froze. He looked toward the front window, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. He looked back at me one last time, a look I will never forget. It wasn't fear of being caught, it was annoyance, like I was a fly that had ruined his picnic. He didn't attack. He turned and sprinted back down the basement stairs. "He's running!" I yelled to the operator. I heard the back door of the basement slam. Moments later, I heard shouting outside. "Police! Get on the ground! Show me your hands!" I dropped the knife and collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. They caught him in the backyard. He had tried to scale the fence, but slipped on the wet grass. They found him with a set of keys and a surgical scalpel in his pocket. But the real horror wasn't Charles. It was what they found in the basement. The police made me leave the house while they processed the scene. I stayed at a hotel that night, but I couldn't sleep. The next day, a detective sat me down to explain. The guest in the bedroom was a 22-year-old woman named Jessica. She had been missing from a neighboring state for 8 months. Charles hadn't just kidnapped her. He was conditioning her. The box she had mentioned wasn't a metaphor. In the center of the bedroom, bolt anchored to the concrete floor, was a custom-built wooden box, about 3 feet by 3 feet. It was lined with soundproofing foam and zinc sheets. It was designed to be completely sensory depriving. The police found journals. Charles was an actuary, yes, but he was obsessed with human resilience. He wanted to see how long it took to break a person's concept of time and self. He kept meticulous spreadsheets, calorie intake, hours of light versus darkness, response times to auditory stimuli. The ice bags? They were for a cold bath therapy he was planning that night to punish her for making noise. The plastic sheeting was to line the floor so he didn't ruin the carpet. Jessica survived, physically, but her mind was shattered. The giggling voice I heard was one of 3 distinct personalities she had developed to cope with the isolation in the box. I moved out immediately. I couldn't walk past that basement door without shaking. I sold the house at a loss to an investor who didn't care about the history. I live in a high-rise apartment now, 15th floor, dormant, no basement. But sometimes, when it's really quiet, I can hear it. Not a sound from my apartment, but a phantom memory. The sound of a low, rhythmic humming coming from beneath the floor. And I remember the look on Charles's face, the calm, disappointed look of a man who is just trying to finish his work. It reminds me that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear sweater vests, pay their rent early in cash, and just want a little bit of quiet.